Have you ever looked into your child's eyes and realized you didn't recognize the person staring back? That moment came for me on a quiet afternoon, the kind where even the air feels heavy with unspoken things. My son, Daniel, stood before me in our old farmhouse kitchen, his jaw clenched, eyes burning with a rage I'd never seen before. I used to think the worst pain in life was losing my husband. But that day, I learned heartbreak could take on new shapes, even wear the face of your own flesh and blood. My name is Margaret Lane, and for most of my 72 years, I've lived on this farm, the same stretch of land my late husband Paul and I built from nothing. It wasn't grand, but it was ours. Every fence post and furrow, carved with love and exhaustion. When Paul passed away suddenly, I thought the hardest part would be learning to sleep without his quiet breathing beside me. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing that without him, my children saw me differently, as something fragile, perhaps even expendable. Daniel and my daughter, Emily, used to run barefoot through these fields, their laughter echoing against the corn rows. Now they rarely visited, except for holidays, or when something needed signing. Daniel worked in finance in Milwaukee, a man always on his phone, always in motion. Emily, gentle but cautious, worked long shifts as a nurse. They both had their own lives, and I never blamed them for that. Still, a mother notices the spaces that grow between calls, between visits, between hearts. After Paul's death, the farm began to feel like a relic of another life. My joints ached with every morning chore, and each season felt heavier than the last. So when I decided to sell it, I told myself it was an act of release, of practicality, not sentiment. What I didn't tell my children was why I was truly selling it. That truth would come later, and it would cut deeper than I ever imagined. The sale went through quietly. $180,000 for the land, the house, and decades of memories. I thought my children would understand, maybe even be relieved that I wouldn't have to work so hard. But when Daniel called, his tone was sharp, almost accusing. "So it's done," he'd said. "You didn't even talk to us first." "It was my decision," I replied. He'd hung up without another word. I tried to ignore the unease twisting in my chest. I told myself it would pass, that once they knew my plans, they'd see the good in them. But that night, as I stood in the empty barn and listened to the wind rattling through loose boards, I had a strange feeling, a whisper of warning I couldn't quite name. I didn't know it yet, but selling that farm wasn't the end of my struggle. It was only the beginning. The morning after the sale, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the check that now represented my life's work. It should have felt liberating, but instead it felt heavy, as if the paper itself carried the weight of every memory buried in that soil. I could still see Paul's hands, rough and calloused, gripping the plow each spring. He used to say, "The land gave back what you put into it." I wondered what it would give me now that I'd let it go. Daniel called again that afternoon. His voice was clipped, the way it gets when he's holding back frustration. "So, what are you planning to do with the money, Mom?" he asked. "I haven't decided yet," I lied, though the truth burned on my tongue. "You should invest it. Let me handle it. I can double it in a few years." I almost laughed. "I don't need more money, Daniel." He exhaled sharply. "Then at least think about your family. You've got grandkids, remember?" I did remember, though I rarely saw them. They were growing up in a world far removed from mine, where kindness was measured in convenience, and patience was a luxury. Daniel spoke as if my only purpose now was to preserve wealth for a future I wasn't even part of. Emily called later that evening, her tone softer, but laced with the same concern. "Daniel's worried," she said. "He thinks you're rushing into things." "I'm not rushing," I replied. "I'm doing what I should have done long ago." She hesitated. "What does that mean?" "You'll understand soon enough," I said. After we hung up, I opened the drawer beneath the counter and pulled out a small, worn photograph. My sister, Grace. Her smile was as bright as I remembered, even though the edges had faded over the years. Grace had died young, too young, from ovarian cancer that she could never afford to treat properly. I'd sat beside her in those final months, listening to her whisper about all the other women like her, women who suffered quietly because no one helped them. Before she passed, she made me promise I'd do something good someday, something lasting, and I had meant it. Selling the farm wasn't an ending. It was a way to keep that promise, to turn years of toil into something meaningful. But I knew Daniel and Emily wouldn't understand. Not yet. To them, the money was inheritance. To me, it was redemption. As night settled over the house, I stood by the window and watched the last light fade over the fields. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of purpose stronger than my grief. Still, a quiet unease crept through me, a sense that peace, like the land I'd sold, would come at a cost I wasn't ready to face. A week after the sale, the quiet around the house began to feel unnatural, like silence before a storm. The phone calls from Daniel grew more frequent, each one sharper than the last. He wanted details, numbers, assurances that I wasn't making a mistake. I stopped answering. I'd learned over the years that silence can sometimes say more than argument ever could. But Daniel wasn't one to let things rest. On a grey Thursday afternoon, his truck rumbled into the driveway unannounced. I knew that sound, the growl of an engine that had carried both his pride and his temper since he was 16. Emily's small sedan followed minutes later. Whatever this was, it wasn't a visit. It was a reckoning. Daniel stepped inside without knocking, his face set in that tight, calculating expression he used in business meetings. Emily lingered near the doorway, her arms crossed, eyes darting nervously between us. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice clipped. "We need to talk about the farm money." I placed my teacup down slowly. "I told you already. It's taken care of." "That's not good enough," he snapped. "You've been avoiding us, and we have a right to know what you're doing." "You have no such right," I said quietly. "It's my decision, and it's final." His eyes flashed. A flicker of disbelief, maybe even betrayal. "Final? Mom, you're 72. You don't even know what to do with that kind of money. Why won't you just trust me with it?" "Because, Daniel," I said, my patience thinning, "I do know what to do with it. You just don't like my choice." Emily tried to step in. "Danny, please, let's just..." But Daniel wasn't listening. His voice rose, echoing off the kitchen walls. "Dad worked himself into the ground for that farm. And now you're just giving it away." "I'm not giving it away," I said, meeting his stare. "I'm honoring someone who deserves it." That name, Grace, hung unspoken between us, like a ghost neither of them could see. I wanted to tell them about her, about the promise that had lived inside me for years. But Daniel's anger drowned out the chance. He slammed his palm against the table, the sharp sound slicing through the room. Emily flinched. I stood my ground, though my hands trembled. "Daniel," I said softly, "if your father were here, he'd tell you the same thing I am. Money doesn't make a life worth living." His jaw clenched. For a long moment, I thought he might turn and leave. Instead, he took a step closer, his voice low and shaking. "You're making a mistake you'll regret." "No," I whispered. "I'm finally doing something I won't." The air between us grew thick, charged with everything neither of us was willing to say. I could feel something unraveling, the fragile thread of love stretched thin by resentment. And though I didn't yet know how far it would snap, I could sense it coming. The moment felt suspended in time. Daniel's face tight with fury, Emily's breath shallow, and my own heartbeat thudding like a drum in my chest. I had seen my son angry before, but never like this. There was something in his eyes that frightened me. Not hatred, but desperation, raw and unchecked. "Mom," This isn't just about you. Daniel's voice cracked as he stepped closer. Do you have any idea what this money could do for us? For my family. I steadied myself against the counter. Daniel, you're not entitled to it. That money isn't yours to decide over. His hands balled into fists at his sides. You're being selfish. That word, selfish, hit harder than it should have. I'd spent my entire life putting others first. I'd raised 2 children, worked beside my husband until my hands blistered, and buried everyone I loved without complaint. If anything, I'd given too much. I've earned the right to decide how my life ends, Daniel, I said quietly, and I won't let guilt dictate my choices. Emily's voice trembled as she tried to calm him. Danny, please stop. You're scaring her. But he didn't stop. He paced the kitchen, his movements sharp, erratic, like a storm trapped in too small a space. You're throwing away everything Dad built. You're choosing some dead memory over your own family. The words sliced through me. Don't you dare talk about your father like that, I said, my tone firm but shaking. He would have understood. Understood what? Daniel shouted, that you care more about strangers than your own blood. The sound of his voice echoed off the walls. I could feel my ribs tighten under the pressure of the moment. I took a step forward, refusing to let fear silence me. I care about doing what's right, I said, and I won't apologize for that. Something snapped in him then. Not a sound, but a change in his posture, a tightening of the jaw. He reached toward me, meaning to grab my arm, maybe to shake sense into me, but his push was too hard, too sudden. Pain exploded through my side as I stumbled backward. The edge of the counter caught my ribs, and the room spun. I gasped. The breath knocked from me. Somewhere in the blur, I heard Emily scream, "Mom!" Daniel froze, his face draining of color. I didn't mean... His voice faded as I collapsed onto the floor. The world became a haze of pain, flashing lights, and the metallic taste of blood. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was Emily crying into the phone, her voice breaking as she said, "Please, send help. My brother, he hurt our mother." And just like that, the silence that had haunted this house for months shattered, replaced by sirens, confusion, and the sound of everything I thought I knew about family breaking apart. When I woke, the world smelled of antiseptic and rain. A steady beeping echoed beside me. My pulse, weak but constant. My ribs ached with every breath, a sharp reminder of what had happened. It wasn't just my body that was fractured. Something far deeper had splintered that day. Emily sat at my bedside, her eyes swollen from crying. "You're awake," she whispered, clutching my hand. Her fingers trembled. "They said you'll be okay. 2 ribs broken, a mild concussion." I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. "Daniel!" Her gaze faltered. "They took him in. The police came. He didn't fight them. He just kept saying he didn't mean to hurt you." A tear slipped down her cheek, and for the first time since the fall, I felt something other than pain. Sorrow, deep and suffocating. I never wanted my children to fear one another, yet here we were. Our family names suddenly wrapped in police reports and hospital files. Over the following days, the doctors came and went, their voices a blur of instructions. Emily stayed, tending to me with quiet guilt. I caught her once, staring at the foundation paperwork on my bedside table. "Mom," she said softly, "I went through your documents about the charity, the Grace Foundation." Her voice trembled on the word grace, as if speaking it aloud carried a weight she could barely lift. "I didn't know," she continued. "I didn't know why you sold the farm." I smiled faintly. "I know you didn't." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought you were just tired. But this, it's beautiful, Mom." Aunt Grace would have been proud. For the first time in months, I felt understood. "That's all I ever wanted," I whispered. Daniel's hearing came 2 weeks later. I attended. my ribs bound beneath my coat, every breath sharp. He wouldn't meet my eyes at first. When the judge asked if I wished to make a statement, I stood, trembling but certain. My son made a terrible mistake, I said. But he's not a monster. He's a man who forgot what love looks like when it's not wrapped in money. Daniel's shoulders shook. When he finally looked at me, there was something raw in his gaze. Remorse. Maybe even recognition. He served 6 months. During that time, Emily helped me open the Grace Foundation. The first donation bought treatment for a woman named Linda, who hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might break again. Only this time, the pain felt worth it. Now when I stand before the small building that bears my sister's name, I feel both the ache of loss and the quiet hum of peace. My children are not who I hoped they'd be, but they are learning, as am I, that love is sometimes found in the ruins of what breaks us. And though my ribs have healed unevenly, every breath reminds me, freedom often comes at a cost, but it's one I'd pay again.